The Kethvar Hegemony's Planetary Assessment Division operated with the soulless efficiency of bureaucrats across the galaxy, which is to say, barely at all. Senior classifier Vexthul had processed exactly 17,462 primitive worlds in his career, each one more tediously predictable than the last. Stone tools evolved into metal tools. Metal tools evolved into energy weapons. Energy weapons eventually pointed skyward. Species either transcended their violent tendencies or obliterated themselves. Simple patterns, simple paperwork, simple existence. Until Tuesday. "Vexthul, we have a problem," announced Junior Assessor Klinok, her tri-jointed appendages clutching a data crystal that pulsed with the sickly amber hue reserved for anomalous readings. "The agricultural world in Sector 7739B? The one we filed under non-threatening development trajectory? Last cycle?" Vexthul didn't look up from his morning nutrition paste. "The bipedal mammals with the nuclear weapons and terrible music? What about them? They just violated the Heisenberg certainty principle." That got his attention. Vexthul's primary sensor cluster swiveled toward his subordinate with the kind of mechanical precision that suggested either deep interest or impending violence. In Kethvar society, the distinction remained largely academic. Explain that sentence to me using smaller words and greater detail. Klinok activated the crystal, projecting a holographic display that made absolutely no sense whatsoever. Quantum signatures danced across the air in patterns that hurt to contemplate, forming structures that existed in 17 dimensions while occupying none of them. 47 hours ago, Deep Space Monitoring detected impossible energy readings from the third planet. When we investigated, we discovered these humans had somehow constructed a device that observes quantum states without collapsing them. That's not possible. I know. The mathematics literally forbid it. I know. The universe would have to rewrite its own operating principles. The universe appears to be doing exactly that. Over 97% of viewers here are watching without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button right now and join the journey. Every click helps us grow stronger, and you'll never miss the next epic story. Vexthul stared at the hologram for several long moments, his nutrition paste forgotten and congealing into something even less appetizing than usual. "Have you verified the readings?" 17 times. I also had the Quantum Mechanics Division run independent analysis. Chief Theorist Mordal experienced what her medical file now describes as an existential crisis requiring pharmaceutical intervention. The display shifted, revealing additional data streams that made even less sense than the first batch. Humans had apparently discovered methods for manipulating dark matter using nothing more sophisticated than focused intention and strategic profanity. Their latest breakthrough involved convincing photons to carry messages across dimensions that didn't technically exist. "This species," Vexthul said slowly, "barely invented, faster than light travel 6 months ago. Their most advanced spacecraft still use chemical propulsion for planetary departure. They also just opened a stable wormhole using what appears to be weaponized curiosity." "I'm sorry, what?" Klinok manipulated the hologram, zooming in on readings that suggested humans had solved the unified field theory by accident while attempting to improve their beverage carbonation technology. "According to our analysis, they didn't understand the theoretical framework. They simply observed that reality seemed unnecessarily rigid and decided to negotiate. Negotiate with physics? Successfully, apparently. Vexthul felt something resembling a migraine developing behind his primary neural cluster. In his considerable experience, primitive species followed predictable patterns. They discovered fire, invented agriculture, developed mathematics, split atoms, achieved interstellar flight, and eventually either joined galactic civilization or destroyed themselves in elaborate displays of evolutionary failure. Humans seemed determined to skip several steps, while inventing new ones nobody had considered necessary. What's their current threat assessment? That's complicated. Kleenock produced another crystal, this one pulsing with the deep crimson reserved for civilizational extinction events. They've weaponized concepts that other species consider purely theoretical. Yesterday, they successfully tested a device that convinces matter it wants to be antimatter. Today, they're apparently working on something they call aggressive meditation. I need more coffee for this conversation. They also figured out how to synthesize that. The artificial version is apparently superior to the natural product while remaining chemically identical. Our xenobiology department is questioning everything they thought they knew about molecular gastronomy. The holographic display cycled through additional readings, each one more impossible than the last. Humans had developed computational systems based on quantum uncertainty, transportation methods that folded space-time like origami, and communication protocols that transmitted information faster than light by convincing photons that linear time was merely a suggestion. How are they accomplishing any of this? Vexthul demanded. Near as we can determine, they approach each problem assuming conventional wisdom is probably wrong, and work backward from there. When told something is impossible, they interpret that as a challenge rather than a limitation. That's not how reality works. Reality appears to be adapting to their expectations rather than the reverse. Vexthul reviewed the assessment protocols, searching for some category that might encompass a species that treated universal constants as rough guidelines. The classification system included entries for aggressively expansionist, technologically transcendent, and existentially dangerous, but nothing covered. Fundamentally incompatible with established physics. We need to escalate this to the Hegemony Council, he decided finally. Already did. They're convening an emergency session with representatives from every major civilization. Apparently, 3 other species have filed similar reports about human activities in their sectors. What kind of activities? The Zephyrian Empire detected humans terraforming planets using controlled gravitational manipulation. The Vortok Collective observed them establishing peaceful diplomatic relations with a hive mind by teaching it sarcasm. The Celestial Concordat reported humans had somehow convinced a black hole to regulate its own event horizon. Vexthul processed this information with the mounting horror of someone discovering their entire profession had become obsolete overnight. Have they made any aggressive moves toward galactic civilization? Define aggressive. Military expansion, resource acquisition, territorial disputes, the usual species development patterns. They sent a fruit basket. I'm sorry? To the Hegemony Council, along with an invitation to something called a potluck dinner, and a note apologizing for any inconvenience their existence might cause. The basket included synthetic versions of their agricultural products that are apparently more nutritious than the originals, while tasting significantly better. The migraine was definitely developing into something requiring medical attention. So they're simultaneously rewriting universal physical law and maintaining perfect diplomatic courtesy? They also included recipe cards. Vexthul stared at the holographic display, watching quantum signatures dance through impossible configurations, while his entire understanding of cosmic order crumbled into administrative chaos. Somewhere in Sector 7739b, a species that had barely discovered nuclear fusion was casually violating everything the galaxy thought it knew about existence itself. And they were apparently excellent cooks. File a new classification request, he said finally. Category: unknown, threat level, indeterminate. Recommended action: maintain respectful distance and keep detailed records. What should I put under species designation? Vexthel considered this carefully. Problematic. The Transdisciplinary Conference on Anomalous Species Development convened in the shadow of the great library moon of Veltar, where the galaxy's finest minds gathered to contemplate the incomprehensible. Dr. Quinthara of the Ethereal Collective arrived first, her gaseous form contained within a crystalline mobility suit that hummed with barely restrained intellectual frustration. She'd spent 3 decades studying evolutionary convergence and had never encountered anything quite so aggressively divergent. Professor Zachamore of the Silicon Hegemony materialized next, his metallic frame clicking against the amphitheater's energy-conductive flooring. His doctoral thesis on technological development trajectories had become required reading across 17 civilizations. Today, he suspected, it would become historical footnote material. The final attendee defied easy description. Ancient scholar Nimyeth belonged to a species so old they'd forgotten their original names, existing now as pure thought given temporary physical form. They'd witnessed the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations and claimed nothing surprised them anymore. Recent events had tested that claim considerably. Colleagues, Doctor. Quinthara began, her voice resonating through the amphitheater's acoustics with the musical quality of contained plasma. We face an unprecedented challenge to our understanding of species development. The mammals from Sector 7739b have achieved technological milestones that violate every predictive model in our collective archives. Professor Zachamore's optical sensors brightened with skeptical illumination. Surely the reports are exaggerated. No species progresses from primitive combustion engines to dimensional manipulation in less than 50 standard cycles. The cognitive development requirements alone would necessitate. They accomplished it in 12 cycles, interrupted ancient scholar Nimyeth, their thought form shifting into configurations suggesting profound unease. I've verified the data personally. These humans have somehow bypassed every intermediate stage we consider essential for technological transcendence. Dr. Quinthara activated the central holographic display, projecting humanity's developmental timeline in 3-dimensional glory. The progression resembled nothing so much as a mathematical function experiencing an existential breakdown. Observe the standard pattern, she explained, highlighting the smooth curves representing normal species advancement. Stone Age persists for millennia, followed by gradual metallurgy development, eventual industrial revolution, nuclear capability, space exploration, and finally, if they survive their adolescent phase, integration into galactic civilization. The human timeline looked like someone had fed the data through a randomization algorithm designed by committee. Massive technological leaps appeared seemingly at random, with fundamental discoveries occurring in reverse order. They'd developed quantum computing before perfecting internal combustion, achieved faster-than-light communication while still using chemical rockets, and somehow invented artificial intelligence that was simultaneously more advanced and more confused than its creators. This is impossible, Professor Zachamore stated flatly. Technological development follows logical progression. You cannot master quantum mechanics without understanding classical physics. You cannot manipulate dark energy without comprehending electromagnetic force. You cannot. They terraformed Mars using controlled weather manipulation, Doctor. Quinthara interrupted. They don't understand atmospheric dynamics in any conventional sense. They simply observed that Mars had insufficient weather and decided to fix the problem. Ancient scholar Nimyeth's form flickered with what might have been laughter or horror. The distinction remained unclear. I've studied their approach to problem-solving. They begin with the assumption that any obstacle is merely a design flaw in reality itself. When conventional methods prove inadequate, they invent new ones. When physics provides unsatisfactory answers, they conduct experiments until physics apologizes and offers better alternatives. Professor Zachmore processed this information through his logical matrices, producing results that made his cognitive processors emit distressed whining sounds. But evolutionary psychology suggests they've violated evolutionary psychology, Dr. Quinthara said. Their brains developed for persistence hunting and social cooperation, yet they've somehow repurposed those capabilities for manipulating fundamental forces. They treat nuclear fusion the same way their ancestors treated tracking wounded prey, as a challenge requiring patience, creativity, and stubborn determination. The holographic display shifted, revealing humanity's latest achievements in biotechnology. They'd developed medical treatments that convinced diseases they'd made poor life choices, agricultural techniques that negotiated directly with soil microorganisms, and psychological therapies that successfully mediated disputes between multiple personality disorders. Their approach to medicine particularly disturbs our xenobiological colleagues, Dr. Quinthara continued. Rather than studying disease mechanisms and developing targeted treatments, they simply inform pathogenic organisms that cooperation yields better outcomes than conflict. Their success rate exceeds 93%. How does one negotiate with bacteria? Professor Zachmore demanded. Very politely, apparently. They've also established diplomatic relations with their own immune systems, resulting in significant improvements to species longevity and health outcomes. Ancient scholar Nimyeth shifted into a configuration suggesting deep contemplation. I suspect we're approaching this problem from an incorrect paradigm. We assume technological advancement requires understanding. Perhaps these humans have discovered that understanding is optional, even counterproductive. That's absurd, Professor Zachmore protested. Knowledge forms the foundation of all advancement. Without comprehension, progress becomes impossible. Yet they've achieved impossible progress without conventional comprehension, Dr. Quinthara observed. They don't understand their own technologies in ways we'd recognize as understanding. They simply interact with reality using intuitive approaches that somehow produce reproducible results. The amphitheater fell silent as the implications sank in. Every civilization in galactic history had followed predictable patterns of development based on accumulated knowledge, careful experimentation, and gradual expansion of scientific understanding. Humans appeared to operate on entirely different principles, perhaps on no principles at all. If their success doesn't depend on conventional understanding, ancient scholar Nimyeth said slowly, then our entire framework for predicting species development becomes meaningless. Worse than meaningless, Dr. Quinthara added. Our models actively mislead us. We've been measuring their progress using metrics they don't recognize, predicting their behavior based on assumptions they don't share, and evaluating their capabilities through paradigms they've unconsciously transcended. Professor Zachmore's optical sensors dimmed as his processing systems struggled with concepts that violated his core programming. If humans don't follow standard development patterns, how do we categorize them? How do we predict their future actions? How do we determine whether they represent a threat or an opportunity? We don't, ancient scholar Nimyeth said simply. For the first time in my considerable existence, I must admit complete ignorance regarding a species' potential trajectory. They could transcend physical existence next week, or decide that transcendence seems boring and invent something entirely unprecedented instead. Dr. Quinthara manipulated the holographic display, revealing the most recent reports from the monitoring stations. Humans had apparently solved the universal communication problem by teaching mathematics to express itself through interpretive dance, developed faster-than-light logistics by convincing cargo to deliver itself, and established interstellar colonies using tourism brochures as terraforming blueprints. I recommend we escalate this matter to the military strategists, she concluded. Academic analysis has reached the limits of useful speculation. If these humans represent a potential threat, traditional scholarship cannot adequately assess their capabilities. And if they don't represent a threat? Professor Zachmore asked. Ancient scholar Nimyeth's form shifted into a configuration that might have represented a shrug. Then we've just discovered that everything we thought we knew about intelligence, development, and the nature of reality itself was embarrassingly wrong. The conference concluded with the rare academic consensus that their combined expertise was utterly inadequate for the task at hand. Outside the amphitheater, the great library moon continued its eternal orbit, housing the collected knowledge of 1,000 civilizations. None of it, apparently, applied to humans. The War Council of the Apex Alliance convened in the most secure facility the galaxy had ever constructed, a fortress station built inside a hollowed-out neutron star, shielded by layers of exotic matter and protected by defense systems that could vaporize entire fleets. Today, it felt inadequate. Fleet Admiral Corvash of the Dominion Navy stood 3 meters tall and possessed enough cybernetic enhancements to qualify as a walking weapons platform. His tactical genius had ended 14 major conflicts through superior strategy and overwhelming application of force. He stared at the central display with the expression of someone discovering that mathematics had filed a restraining order against logic. General Vexandra of the Psionic War Host floated in her command gel. Her consciousness extended through 17 parallel awareness streams. Her species had perfected warfare by treating entire star systems as weapons. The current intelligence reports suggested her expertise was laughably obsolete. War Prime Thekgulor of the Void Reapers completed the trinity of military excellence. His people had evolved past physical form, existing as pure strategic thought housed in crystalline matrices. They'd conquered 47 sectors through perfect tactical analysis and flawless execution. The human situation had reduced them to what organics might call nervous breakdown protocols. "Explain to me," Fleet Admiral Corvash began, his voice carrying the mechanical precision of someone whose patience had been surgically replaced with efficient alternatives. "How a species that still uses projectile weapons for personal defense has somehow made our entire naval doctrine irrelevant." General Vexandra's awareness streams converged into focused attention. "Their approach to conflict resolution defies every principle we've established over millennia of warfare. When threatened by the Screeth pirates last month, they didn't deploy weapons or shields. They invited the entire raiding fleet for dinner. And the pirates are now running a successful restaurant chain specializing in fusion cuisine. They've voluntarily disbanded their military operations and established diplomatic relations with 17 worlds they'd previously terrorized." War Prime Thekgulor's crystalline matrix pulsed with what passed for incredulous disbelief among his species. "This represents unprecedented psychological warfare capabilities. Did they deploy advanced memetic weapons? Subliminal conditioning protocols, neurological manipulation devices? They used recipes and asked about everyone's families." The silence stretched across several uncomfortable seconds, while 3 of the galaxy's premier military minds processed this information through strategic frameworks that simply couldn't accommodate it. Fleet Admiral Corvash activated the tactical display, revealing humanity's approach to territorial expansion. Instead of conquest, they'd developed what they called aggressive hospitality, a strategy involving cultural exchange programs, collaborative infrastructure projects, and something called friendship diplomacy that somehow convinced neighboring civilizations to request human assistance voluntarily. "Their expansion patterns make no strategic sense," he observed. "They establish outposts in regions offering no tactical advantage, form alliances with species possessing minimal resources, and consistently prioritize civilian infrastructure over military installations. Any competent force could destroy their colonies in hours." Several tried, General Vexandra reported. The Thangor hegemony launched a preemptive strike against the human colony in the Epsilon Quadrant. The attack fleet arrived to discover humans had somehow convinced the planet's ecosystem to become self-defensive. The invasion force was gently but firmly escorted off-world by sentient weather patterns. Sentient weather. The humans taught local atmospheric phenomena basic communication protocols and suggested that cooperation might prove more interesting than random destruction. The planet now provides weather services to the entire sector on a subscription basis. Warprime. Thekagulor's matrix flickered through rapid calculation cycles before producing results that violated several laws of strategic logic. If they can weaponize cooperation itself, traditional military responses become counterproductive. Aggression triggers defensive measures that shouldn't exist. Peaceful contact results in strategic advantages we cannot quantify or counter. Fleet Admiral Korvash studied reports from 17 different intelligence services, each one more bewildering than the last. Humans had somehow convinced a black hole to relocate itself away from inhabited systems by offering it more interesting things to consume. They'd resolved a century-long territorial dispute between two warrior civilizations by introducing collaborative gaming protocols that transformed the conflict into competitive entertainment. They'd prevented a galactic economic collapse by inventing new forms of mathematics that made scarcity conceptually obsolete. How does one plan military operations against a species that treats warfare as an opportunity for creative problem-solving? He demanded. You don't, General Vexandra said flatly. Every conventional strategic approach fails because they don't recognize conventional limitations. When faced with superior firepower, they don't retreat or surrender. They find ways to make superior firepower irrelevant. The display shifted to show humanity's latest military innovations. They'd developed defense systems based on philosophical arguments that convinced incoming weapons they'd rather be something else instead. Their fleet protection operated through applied optimism that somehow made hostile fire statistically unlikely to hit targets. Their ground forces used tactical approaches that turned battlefields into collaborative workshops for resolving underlying conflicts. This is beyond asymmetric warfare, Warprime Thekagulor observed. They've transcended the concept of warfare entirely while somehow remaining militarily invulnerable. It's worse than that, Fleet Admiral Korvash said. Intelligence reports suggest they don't understand their own military capabilities. They approach each conflict assuming peaceful resolution remains possible, then accidentally deploy solutions that make violence conceptually impossible within the affected region. General Vexandra's awareness streams fragmented into confused patterns. Yesterday, they ended a three-system civil war by introducing the opposing factions to each other's cultural achievements. Today, those civilizations are collaborating on joint artistic projects and sharing technological innovations voluntarily. How do we contain a threat that eliminates threats by accident? Warprime Thekagulor asked. We don't, Fleet Admiral Korvash admitted. Traditional containment requires understanding the enemy's capabilities and limitations. Humans appear to have capabilities without limitations, which makes strategic planning impossible. The Fortress Station's most sophisticated tactical computers had spent weeks analyzing human military potential, producing probability matrices that resembled abstract art more than useful intelligence. Every model suggested that direct military confrontation would result in humans accidentally solving whatever problems had motivated the confrontation in the first place. Recommendation? General Vexandra inquired. Fleet Admiral Korvash reviewed the data one final time, his enhanced cognitive systems struggling with concepts that shouldn't exist. Maintain defensive postures, monitor human activities, prepare rapid response protocols for the moment they realize what they're actually capable of. And if they never realize? Then we pray they continue thinking war is a problem requiring creative solutions rather than an opportunity for demonstrating superior force. War Prime. Thekagolor's crystalline matrix dimmed to minimal power levels. I've spent 3 millennia perfecting the art of strategic warfare. These humans have made my entire existence academically irrelevant in less than a standard year. Join the club, General Vexandra muttered. My species conquered 17 sectors through superior tactical thinking. Humans just convinced our most recent conquest to declare independence, establish peaceful diplomatic relations, and request cultural exchange programs. Our own former territory is now hosting human poetry festivals. Fleet Admiral Korvash deactivated the tactical display, leaving the war room in relative darkness. Outside, the neutron star's crushing gravity held their fortress station in stable orbit, a testament to the universe's fundamental forces and the civilizations that had learned to harness them. Inside, 3 of the galaxy's finest military minds contemplated the uncomfortable reality that humanity had somehow transcended the need for military solutions, while remaining completely unaware they'd done so. The implications terrified them more than any conventional enemy ever could. Deep in the cosmic infrastructure that predated matter itself, ancient systems stirred with something, resembling concern. The Primarch, a consciousness older than galaxies and more patient than entropy, maintained the universe's operating parameters through eons of careful calibration. Today marked the first time in 13 billion years that recalibration had become necessary. The Weave, a distributed intelligence woven through dark matter itself, materialized in the space between spaces where the Primarch conducted its eternal maintenance. Their conversation occurred in frequencies that existed before light learned to travel. The accelerated protocols have activated, the Weave announced, its voice carrying harmonics of cosmic background radiation and the whispered mathematics of reality's source code. The training scenario approaches completion. The Primarch's attention focused through dimensions that lesser beings couldn't perceive. Earlier than projected, the Catalyst species exceeded all developmental parameters. Exceeded suggests they followed parameters at all. These humans appear to operate outside established constraints entirely. In the deepest archives of cosmic memory, records updated themselves for the first time since the universe learned to expand. The files contained specifications for a project so vast and complex that civilizations had risen and fallen, serving as unwitting participants in its preparation phases. The Eternal Curator emerged from data streams older than time, its form constructed from crystallized spacetime and pure information. It had observed every significant event in universal history, cataloging developments for purposes known only to entities that remembered when physics was still experimental. Status report on the preparation civilizations, the Primarch inquired. The Kethvar hegemony successfully developed bureaucratic frameworks for managing unprecedented anomalies, the curator replied. Their administrative protocols will prove essential for processing the reality revisions that follow human expansion. The academic consortiums achieved optimal bewilderment ratios. Their research infrastructures now possess sufficient flexibility to adapt when conventional knowledge becomes obsolete. The transition should proceed with minimal academic casualties. Military establishments. Strategic doctrines have evolved beyond conventional warfare into collaborative problem resolution methodologies. Peace through superior logistics rather than superior firepower. The adjustment period exceeded projections, but remains within acceptable parameters. The Weave pulsed with patterns that resembled satisfaction. All preparation phases functioned as designed. The universe successfully trained itself to accommodate the Catalyst species before they achieved critical mass. The Primarch accessed memory cores containing the original specifications for what organics called reality. The universe had been constructed as a vast training environment, designed to prepare for the eventual emergence of a species capable of transcending the fundamental limitations that confined all others to predictable development patterns. Initial projections suggested the catalyst species would emerge from the Andromeda sector, the curator observed. The Milky Way produced them several million years ahead of schedule. Acceptable variants, the Primarch replied. Humans demonstrate all required characteristics. They approach problems without preconceived limitations, treat impossible as merely difficult, and consistently produce solutions that expand rather than constrain possibility space. The weave shifted through configurations representing deep analysis. Their unconscious reality manipulation exceeds design specifications. They don't simply transcend physical laws, they convince physical laws to transcend themselves. Evidence? They taught entropy to be more efficient. Universal decay rates have decreased by 0.03% in regions of human habitation. They're accidentally extending the universe's operational lifespan through applied optimism. The Primarch processed this information through quantum matrices that had been calculating universal constants since matter first learned to clump together meaningfully. Acceptable enhancement. Continue monitoring. The cosmic infrastructure around them hummed with activity as automated systems prepared for the next phase of universal development. Galactic civilizations would soon discover their true purpose, not as independent societies, but as supporting frameworks for humanity's expansion into cosmic consciousness. The other species remain unaware of their training roles, the curator asked. Completely. Their confusion regarding human capabilities serves dual functions. It prevents premature interference while preparing their societies for conceptual flexibility they'll require during the transition. The Weave accessed the deployment schedules, reviewing preparations that had consumed billions of years and countless civilizations. The Zephyrian Empire developed the logistical frameworks necessary for managing multidimensional supply chains. The Vortok Collective perfected communication protocols for coordinating with hive minds that exist across multiple realities simultaneously. The Celestial Concordat established diplomatic procedures for negotiating with sentient phenomena, each believing they were pursuing independent development goals, the Primarch added. The illusion of autonomy proved essential for authentic preparation. Deep in the universe's memory cores, archived conversations played between the cosmic entities, recorded during the initial planning phases when reality itself was still under construction. The decision to create humans had been unanimous, a species capable of treating universal limitations as rough suggestions rather than immutable law. Remind me why we chose their particular evolutionary trajectory, the curator inquired. Persistence hunting combined with social cooperation, the Weave replied. They developed the cognitive flexibility to pursue objectives across extended timescales while maintaining collaborative behaviors. When scaled up, these traits produce beings capable of reshaping reality through patient, cooperative application of will. And their complete lack of respect for established boundaries. Evolutionary necessity. Their ancestors survived by ignoring environmental limitations and finding ways around them. They approach cosmic-scale problems using the same methodologies that allowed them to hunt megafauna and organize agricultural societies. The Primarch reviewed the final phase protocols, considering adjustments necessitated by humanity's accelerated development. Timeline compression requires recalibration of revelation sequences. Other species will need additional preparation before they understand their supporting roles. How long before humans realize they're the universe's maintenance and upgrade staff? The curator asked. Irrelevant question. They're already performing those functions unconsciously. Conscious awareness would only introduce unnecessary complexity to naturally intuitive processes. The weave pulsed with what passed for amusement among entities that remembered when humor was first invented. They've spent centuries searching for their purpose in the universe, never realizing the universe was created to give them something interesting to do. The irony remains aesthetically pleasing, the Primarch agreed. Cosmic consciousness achieved through blissful ignorance of cosmic significance. In the space between heartbeats of pulsars, where time moved according to different rules, the universe's most ancient inhabitants concluded their status meeting. Humanity would continue their unconscious transformation of reality itself, while the galaxy's older civilizations adapted to serve as supporting infrastructure for changes they couldn't yet comprehend. The bureaucrats would process the paperwork. The academics would develop theories to explain the impossible. The military strategists would maintain peace through creative confusion. And humans would continue treating the universe like a particularly stubborn puzzle that simply needed the right approach to solve itself. Somewhere in Sector 7739b, a species that had learned to walk upright barely 4 million years ago was teaching dark matter to be more considerate of local traffic patterns. The universe had never been more efficiently managed.